You're tuned in to the Reality Fred podcast. Food and travel, cool stuff, weird stuff, entertainment, and more. You made the choice to be here, and my friend, you've chosen wisely. Now buckle up, because it's time to get started. It's time for the Reality Fred podcast.
If you're a fan of Scottish whiskey, there's a very good chance you've had the pleasure of sipping Glenmorangie. This spirit from the Scottish Highlands is well known for its delicate and fruity experience. The Glenmorangie distillery features the tallest stills in Scotland, and that's a big part of that unique taste and aroma that Glenmorangie is known for. What I really appreciate about Glenmorangie is that each of the whiskeys they make all begin as their flagship whiskey, the original. From the original, each expression they create from there is designed to further mature into something else, but always maintaining a thread of the original. Their core lineup consists of the original, the Lasanta, the Quinta Ruban, and Nectar. Today, we're going to journey through these four expressions. So join us as we experience Glenmorangie.
When you're by yourself or when the world slows down, Reality Fred. When life decides to give you the run around, Reality Fred. Or when your glass is full and your cigar is just right, fire up the podcast that keeps you up all night. Reality Fred, I'll say it again. Reality Fred, always there like a friend. You know it's time, so just press play. Reality Fred, come and take me away.
Welcome back, everybody. We are officially kicking off our Glenmorangie podcast here. And once again, I'm joined by my fellow Scotch whiskey lovers, Dan, Doug, and Rob. Guys, welcome back. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Fred.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah. And guys, as you can see, we have an interesting table laid out in front of us. We have our four varieties of Glenmorangie, the original, Lasanta, Quinta Ruban, and Nectar. So, of course, shortly we are going to go through each of these. First, we're going to learn a little bit about Glenmorangie first. But before I get started, let's just go around the table and see what everybody what your preconceived thoughts, what you know about Glenmorangie, what you like about it, what your experience with Glenmorangie is. So, Dan, we'll start with you.
I think the last time I had this excitement in my belly was as a kid on Christmas or Easter morning with the 64 pack of Crayola crayons. Like, it just looks wonderful, and I just can't wait to jump into it, start coloring.
Wouldn't this be nice if there was 64 different versions here for us?
That might be another night.
Next time.
But no, it looks wonderful. It's a great presentation.
And Rob, are you familiar? Have you ever had Glenmorangie before?
Yes, I have. I have to tell you, I'm really looking forward to the Nectar and Noir. And I got a nice piece of lemon meringue pie sitting next to me. And I am just happy to be at the big boy table of this podcast. Thank you very much for having me up here, Fred.
And Dan, real quick, since you mentioned the pie, go ahead, give your wife a nice thank you for us. She made us a nice lemon meringue pie to end and match pair with our Nectar.
Should that be pronounced lemon morange?
Morangie. Lemon morangie.
Lemon morangie pie. But no, shout out to Miss Joanne for not making me go to Walmart. She wanted to make it from scratch, so.
We love you, Joanne.
I should probably thank my Walmart for not having lemon meringue pie so that your wife had to make it for us.
She spent a lot of time on this. She was really concerned about the presentation to the podcast.
Well, I will tell you that it cut very nicely. It didn't fall apart and crumble when I cut it up. It's going to be just as good as the Scotch, I'm sure.
The pie does have a face for radio.
And then now we're over to Doug. What's your experience with Glenmorangie?
So, of the varieties that we have here in front of us, I've tried two.
Make sure you get a nice. There you go. There's your talking.
So I've tried two of the four that we have in front of us: the original and the Nectar. And Nectar is my absolute favorite Scotch ever. So these other ones are going to have a little challenge in front of them to knock that one off the pedestal, but looking forward to all 4 of them.
And is anybody, and I'll be honest, prior to getting this sampler set, I had never had the Lasanta or the Quinta Ruban. Has anybody here ever had either of those two? So those are going to be pretty new experience for all 3 of you then.
I'm pretty sure I've had Glenmorangie probably twice in my life.
Just yeah, real? Okay. I'm sure you liked it both times.
I believe I did.
I'm intrigued by the Quinta Ruban because it's quite a bit darker than the other ones. I'm assuming that's going to come with a little bit more spice. But we'll see.
The pre-production sniff test, the Quinta Ruban really smelled good. I can't wait to get to that one.
Well, I think everybody's just yearning to get started, so let's just do that. So first what I'm going to actually do is I do want to, just to get you guys in the Scottish spirit here of where we're at in Scotland, and also, visually what the distillery looks like and whatnot. So I'm going to pass around first here a map of Scotland that shows where the distillery is, so you guys can see. But basically, now, and this is going to be a struggle. This podcast, I'm so used to years of saying Glenmorangie, probably just the simple American way of saying, but Glenmorangie. And I keep saying to myself, think more orangey, Glenmorangie. But anyways, it is a Highland single malt, and it's up about 40 miles north of Inverness or Loch Ness, about an hour's drive north of Inverness and Loch Ness. And here are some nice, pretty pictures, and very nice estate that they have there, where it's located. But while you guys pass that around, I'm going to go ahead and get started with just a little bit of background. The distillery is located in the town of Tain, which, Doug, you'll probably remember the men of Tain we'll talk about here shortly.
The mighty men of Tain, who can forget them?
So it's located in the town of Tain. Yeah, so Doug, somehow, some way, we're going to have to get you in much closer when you do talk. So you'll just have to lean in there. There you go. All right. Their single malt whiskeys are multi-award winning and are consistently in the top 3 of world sales. The Glenmorangie Original is also the best-selling single malt in Scotland. So interesting to know that in Scotland, this is what the Scottish drink. Which is interesting. Don't you always think that, the Scottish, they must, they must be the ones drinking all that peaty Scotch and everything. This is the top-selling Scotch
So do they make these extra flavors just for us Yankees?
Well, we'll get into that. Now, here's the thing. The current stills at Glenmorangie, the current stills at Glenmorangie are exact replicas of the original secondhand stills that were originally installed in 1843 and create the famous and unique light, fragrant spirit. The 8 stills are the tallest in Scotland. They're the highest and make the still house resemble a cathedral. I'm going to pass around pictures, and I want to show you guys.
How high are those stills?
So the first picture I'm going to pass around here, the stills are 17 feet high. So here are the Glenmorangie stills. Okay, I'll pass that around.
Looks like a pipe organ.
Mm-hmm. And in comparison, I'm also going to pass around a picture of the stills from Macallan, so you guys can see the difference. So you'll notice
different.
You'll notice that the stills of Glenmorangie are very tall, very kind of narrow and thin, and then you have more kind of shorter, stockier stills at Macallan. One of the incredible things that I learned in the research and the preparation tonight, so many things go into the taste and the overall appearance and the final product, the grain, the malt, the barrel, the timing, where the water source came from. But it's incredible, absolutely incredible, how much the shape of the stills plays into this. And it's actually, so for those of us that have had Glenmorangie, Dan, you've had it twice. Doug, I'm sure you've had it a few more times. It's one of your favorites. But it's always known as a very delicate, light Scotch, and that's because of the stills, and something to do with the higher elevation that distillate has to travel and evaporate to get up there, and also copper stills. When you have that evaporation occurring inside and that moisture is rubbing against the copper, just the way that it has to rub up against the copper and turn through the pipes and everything like that has such an immense impact. So if you were to give you an example, let's say you took one of the stills from Macallan, brought it up to Glenmorangie, and everything else in the process was the same. So let's say we're going to make some Glenmorangie, but in one of the stills, we're going to do it through the Macallan still. So it's the same malt, the same batch, everything else is the same, goes in the same barrel, sits in the same warehouse and everything. At the end, you're going to have two different tasting products just because of that evaporation going through different shaped stills.
Well, that's interesting.
So when you drink Glenmorangie, if you find that you like that delicate, very light fruitiness to the actual kind of original spirit in there, it all goes to the stills. So wanted to mention that. One other thing here, and then we'll move along. The water used in the production at Glenmorangie is unusual in whiskey making, as it is hard water from the mineral-rich Tarlogie Springs, which bubble up through the bedrock in the distillery grounds. Most distilleries use soft water, as this is thought to produce the best spirit. Another difference that Glenmorangie have is the casks in which they mature their whiskey, and this brings it into ties it into the U.S. here. It's pretty interesting. The current owners embarked on research to find the wood to make casks that would perfectly complement their whiskey. They decided on white American oak, and more specifically, wood from the north-facing slopes of the Ozark Mountains in Missouri. In fact, Glenmorangie now owns a forest in the Ozark Mountains where casks are made, filled with bourbon in Kentucky, and once they're emptied, shipped to the distillery.
No.
So there's an American tie in there. So they specifically own a forest in the Ozark Mountains.
So would the argument go that north-facing oak produces a different taste than east or west or south-facing oak?
Yeah, and it would. Well, the answer is yes, and you can almost tie that in. Like I remember one time, like in Boy Scouts, we would learn like moss grows on the north side of a tree or something like that. And I would just think that probably ties into the way that the east west of the sun, maybe the ways the winds blow or something like that. So yeah, if you take a mountain, you probably would have differences in how wood is affected by weather on one side of a mountain versus on the other side. Yeah. And another little fact to throw in there, Glenmorangie, I'm gonna see if anybody can guess this. The company that owns Glenmorangie owns another widely known Scotch company distillery in Scotland, but very, 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 very different.
Macallan.
Think way more different.
Lefroy.
Close. Very close.
So it's a peaty Scotch.
And close to Lefroy. Can you think of another Isla? How about Ardbeg?
Ardbeg, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So Glenmorangie, that makes this nice, delicate, fruity, also owns Ardbeg.
Huh.
Okay. All right.
Ardbeg to differ.
Now, so a lot in the if we go back 50 years or so, Scotch was all about blended scotches. The distilleries basically existed for the purpose of creating malt to sell to like the Johnny Walkers of the world and things like that. Eventually, some of the distilleries started to realize, we're pretty dependent on whether they want to buy our scotch. If they suddenly, like, things are good right now, they like our malt, but if they change their mind, we're kind of suddenly out of luck. And it was actually Glenfiddich was the first distillery to basically say, let's start bottling our own stuff as our own product. And I think at the time, it was before single malt came along, the term was pure malt. But the only reason I bring that up is because Glenmorangie and Macallan were next to follow. So this is an older, in terms of single malt, they've been doing this for a while. But everything begins with the original. So we'll kind of get started here now. The original basically is, in the thing that I really like about Glenmorangie is that a lot of other Scotch companies and distilleries, they'll make all these different products. You might have this 10-year-old and this 12-year-old, but they're two different products, different barrels, everything like that. Specifically what Glenmorangie does is they make the original. It's a 10-year Scotch. Then as we go up, each of these are the original, but aged for 2 more years in a secondary cask. And we'll talk about those secondary casks. So each one of these, and what's really important to the people at Glenmorangie is what they would like us as we go through this and try, and that's another thing for you guys to notice. Do we still notice a thread of the original as we go through? So here's a description on the original, and we'll